Out of the gates and ready to go. OutKick 360 is live and underway from 6th and Peabody, Nashville, Tennessee, with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Jam-packed show as usual with a ton of news this afternoon to kick off the afternoon slate at work for the drive home, whatever it may be. We're glad you're with us. Later in today's show, about 2 hours, pitching great Curt Schilling joins us. MLB trade deadline, a lot of movement around Major League Baseball. DeGrom is back for the Mets. Schilling joins us at the top of hour number 3. And then about 20 minutes later, Jim Leyritz will be on the show, and we will discuss all things trade deadline plus the captain, the Jeter documentary that's going on with ESPN. Jim had a front row seat to much of that.
Plus his killing the Braves in 1996.
Yeah. He'll be on with us a bit later in today's show. Michael McCann, legal expert from Sportico. He'll be joining us in 20 minutes, and what a day to have McCann on the show. We'll get to those headlines. Plus, John McClain returns. He's in hour number 2 with all of the NFL headlines. And that's where we start, guys. Good afternoon.
So I'm caught up now on the captain after watching episode 4.
I'm one behind.
A lot of good tie-ins to the show today because Curt Schilling was a big part of episode 4, where the Diamondbacks and Curt Schilling beat the Yankees in 2001 post 9/11, and that was a big part of the story in the latest episode. Also, I was struck by, but Paul's right, the Braves choked a 6-0 lead in Game 3, up 2-0 on the Yankees. I was shocked to see the A's level of choke. I think in 2001, maybe where they're up 2-0 and they're coming back home and they're up like 4 or 5-0. Similar situation, and the Yankees came back and won
with the tag, which was ignored in the captain, and is big part of Derek Jeter lore that he did the double cutoff play, but in his own thing he ignores it.
Yeah, I think that was 2003. This was before that.
This
series they came back, it was before it.
It wasn't. I mean, they're through the whole dynasty part, and he didn't talk about it. They ignored it, which is weird.
Big news in the NFL. We'll get to Deshaun Watson and the latest there in a moment, but news coming down through the league with Stephen Ross, the owner of the Miami Dolphins, fined $1.5 million. He's suspended from the league until middle of October. We have all the details for you right now. And they've been docked a first-round pick next year and a 2024 third-round pick. This stems not from tanking on purpose, which the NFL clearly states they say did not happen. This stems from their pursuit of Tom Brady and Sean Payton from 2019 with Brady and last year with Sean Payton. And guys, it's hard not to look at the timing of this announcement with everything else going on this week with Watson. But we've been waiting on news in regards to this investigation, which is also a independent, private investigation through the NFL of Miami. And here is the conclusion for the tampering that took place, which was not, for some reason, a big story. We had a topic about this. This was a local Miami outlet that covers the Dolphins that had this report with an unnamed player. Turns out it was Tom Brady.
Which was pretty obvious conclusion to reach.
And it went further with the pursuit of Brady and ownership and how they wanted it to be Brady and Peyton in this offseason. Of course, the Dolphins end up with Mike McDaniel, and they still have Tua. But it wasn't a massive story like it is today in regards to the discussion of the penalty and how harsh the NFL would view this.
Well, it got swallowed up in relative short order because more was brought to light about it in conjunction with the Flores suit and the potential the tanking claim.
Yeah.
And so the tanking claim is much bigger than this. I think this penalty is good on the one hand. I mean, the draft pick punishment is pretty significant, though I think if you put it in the same year, it really hurts a team. They put it in consecutive years. So 2023 first rounder and 2024 third rounder for a team that just dealt a lot away for Tyreek Hill.
Which they have a first rounder still in 2023.
Yeah, which
they're losing one of them.
Somewhat surprising.
Yeah.
They are severely diminished in the upcoming drafts.
Yeah.
based on that trade and these penalties. So I think that is a severe punishment for tampering. The suspension is ridiculous. To suspend him till October 17th is like, hey, go do what Daniel Snyder's been doing and take a little yacht trip.
That yacht that you met Tom Brady on, enjoy that yacht a little bit more until October.
So that's ridiculous. The fine, $1.5 million, we all know how insignificant that is to an NFL owner. So good job on the draft picks, poor job on the suspension. And you made it sound like the tanking thing is dead. Is the tanking thing dead?
They said they found no evidence of them losing on purpose.
It's dead.
That is a direct quote from the league.
Well, see, I don't think that that to me miscasts the question. The question isn't did they try to lose on purpose. The question is did Stephen Ross indicate to Brian Flores he wanted him to lose on purpose?
He did. So let's get into this, okay? Because I've read
Those
the
are
entire
two different things, Chad.
I've read the entire document. I've read the entire response from Stephen Ross on this. By the way, I have a 7 and 8-year-old girls softball draft tonight. I have not been docked a first-round pick, so I'm ahead of Stephen Ross so far.
Good luck to you that it stays that way. There's still time.
There's been a little tampering that's gone on, I will admit to, but I've yet to be caught
Chad,
and docked a pick.
Before you dive into this, I want to clarify something. The Dolphins, keep in mind, they have 2 first-rounders next year, right? The other first-rounder comes from San Francisco.
Yes.
For the Trey Lance trade.
Yeah, that's what I said. They still have 1 remaining because of the trade.
Yeah, so they came out ahead between Lance
they lost their
and
second
Hill.
one. Yeah. They still have another first-round
pick. It's their
pick.
own pick. I would presume that's being taken away.
Yes. So this is a wild statement from Stephen Ross in all of this. And we dissected this with Armando Salguero yesterday on the Browns end of it and how it was the perfect. I actually did a Fox News minute on this. The perfect non-apology from the Browns. Oh, I'm sorry if anyone's triggered. Oh, Deshaun is super remorseful about the situation, but not about anything that he's done. So Stephen Ross says the independent investigation cleared our organization on any issues related to tanking and all of Brian Flores' other allegations. As I have said all along, these allegations were false, malicious, and defamatory, and the issue is now put to rest. There he is. He's putting it to rest, okay? With regards to tampering, I strongly disagree with the conclusions and the punishment. However, I will accept the outcome because the most important thing is that there be no distractions for our team as we begin an exciting and winning season. How is he saying he strongly disagrees with it? It seems to me they got a pretty good case that all these things happen. Probably from principles of the case. Probably from Tom Brady and Sean Payton talking about it with the NFL, about discussions they had.
But he's
over
not,
the years. In the case of Brady, we're talking about over multiple years.
But what he did is he was insulated. The way I read it earlier today was he had this guy, last name Bill, who was the liaison. He was the liaison for Ross in the direct contact with Brady's management while he was in New England in 2019.
So he covered himself.
But I mean, to a
degree,
it was also made clear that was under the direct order, and Ross knew about it.
Yeah, buck stops with him, kind of thing.
Now, the other part of this, and I'm trying to pull up the exact wording, but I can paraphrase pretty easily on this. Roger Goodell's league statement about tampering and about tanking was the league said there's no evidence of tanking. In fact, they beat the Patriots and they beat Cincinnati close to the end of the season. So the team clearly was not tanking. Then they get into this weird verbiage of it also is important that in the position of an owner of a team that you not joke in a way that could be deemed serious when it comes to issues of game integrity. They basically admit that Stephen Ross would joke with people around the building about, not joke, he would talk openly about caring more about draft position than wins. And that he did joke with Stephen Ross about a $100,000 bonus.
With Flores.
Sorry. Stephen Ross joked with Flores about the $100,000 bonus per loss. They're saying that without fully stating it. But also saying there's been no witness to this other than Flores, who's claiming it. They could not find a witness that said that he made these bribes in order to tank and lose games. And the evidence is there that they simply didn't intentionally lose games. So no harm, no foul. But we've talked with Stephen Ross that it's important in your position that if any issue of we should lose this game intentionally for draft position comes up, you can't even jokingly respond with a friend and say, I'd offer up $100,000 to Flores if he would help make that happen.
So Mike Florio says that Goodell is going to read the Riot Act about tampering and about tanking to the owners next week at a meeting. And I get what you're saying, Chad, about that. Don't joke about it. So now it becomes a more taboo thing. This tells us that Flores didn't have the receipts or the receipt that he claimed he has in terms of some kind of documentation of this. But still, I think the league is missing a broader point here. The fact that Flores didn't tank and have his team tank is one thing. That's what he said, basically. He said he got fired for not doing it, or that was part of his claim. And I think any coach in the league wouldn't do it, would rebuff an urge from an owner to do it. Though in Cleveland, you couldn't help but do it because your roster was so bad. But Hugh Jackson's a terrible coach. Also, the point is there's a huge difference between a thematic desire for it to be done and doing it. And Stephen Ross is not innocent if he was even like laying it out there. And this is a way to lay it out there if you want it done, to smartly lay it out there, to jokingly put it out there in a consistent way where your employers might take it seriously, get the message because you keep doing it and you keep doing it. That makes it clear that you actually want it done. It doesn't matter if Flores did it or not. It matters that your message is draft position is more important to me than winning games. And that's what's running through the veins of this franchise at this time. And so if they're simply dismissing it because it wasn't done, they're missing the point. And that's a very obvious thing to everybody. So they're just missing the point on purpose to get rid of the story and conclude it and shift it to the tampering where there's an obvious violation. They can take draft picks, they can do the fine, and they could be done with it and wash their hands of the whole thing. It's a purposeful misunderstanding of what happened.
So there's no evidence that I've seen of racial discrimination, and that is what Brian Flores sued over. Racial discrimination by Stephen Ross.
That's the third thing in this case, really.
I don't see any even allegation that would prove that or show that Stephen Ross is a racist and that's why he fired Brian Flores. But to your point, Paul, I think there's some evidence of some professional malpractice with Stephen Ross in all of this in regards to Brian Flores. Quote, this is from Roger Goodell, and I found the exact quotes from the report. Stephen Ross expressed his belief that the Dolphins' position in the upcoming 2020 draft should take priority over the team's win-loss record. Again, this is being made by the owner of the team. He said this frequently to team president and CEO Tom Garfinkel, but he also made general manager Chris Greer, senior vice president Brandon Shore, and Coach Flores aware of this desire that he had, okay? This is not joking. This is him stating draft position more important than wins to these principles involved. Now, here's where Goodell gets into the joking part of this. Quote, an owner or senior executive must understand the weight that his or her words carry and the risk that a comment will be taken seriously and acted upon, even if that is not the intent or expectation. Even if made in jest and not intended to be taken seriously, comments suggesting that draft position is more important than winning can be misunderstood and carry with them an unnecessary potential risk to the integrity of the game. He goes on to talk about what we talked about yesterday. It applies to Deshaun Watson. The integrity of the game matters more than anything to the NFL, to Roger Goodell, to everyone. And any violation that hurts the integrity of the game is the most serious risk to the NFL.
And I completely agree that it is. I mean, it's the integrity aspect of the behind-the-scenes nature of the sport. You have to maintain that everything's on the up and up. But he's also not wrong by saying that draft position is more than winning games for that season. It's absolutely a fact. So if he said that behind the scenes, that's true. Actually, thinking about stealing something and actually doing it are two different things.
Sure.
Yes, but also if I don't know that he can prove it, But if Brian Flores, again, I don't know why he's throwing the racial element into it, but if Brian Flores could somehow prove that he was fired for not losing more, then they would have a problem.
Well, they're penalizing him solely based on what they can prove, which is the tampering.
Correct.
Right.
And I mean, as far as the fine goes and the penalties involved, so he's suspended from team operations as the team owner until the middle of October. He does not attend any NFL league meetings until the big league meeting in 2023.
Which a lot of these guys don't want to be at.
He's back in, and then the Mr. Beal, one of the minority owners,
who was the buffer guy in this.
Yes. He will not be allowed to attend meetings either this entire year. He's also docked $500,000. In terms of fines, I mean, you can go to what we've seen Robert Kraft get fined, what we've seen others fine. I mean, we saw a $10 million fine to Washington, $1.5 million here. I mean, I realize $1.5 million isn't much for these billionaires, but I don't know what penalty makes everyone happy in this case.
$500 for Beal too, who probably gets that covered by Ross, right?
I guess.
So, I mean, you don't know how that works, but how can they prove that Ross is paying it or not paying it? You don't know.
Right. All of this is interesting. The biggest point, though, to me, is they say blatantly in here there is no evidence that anyone intentionally lost a game that Miami never lost on purpose.
I believe that. I totally believe that they never lost a game, but I don't think that's the broader point. I think the broader point is, were they encouraged to lose a game? And I believe they were encouraged to lose a game, and I believe that's big. Bigger than
if the conversation behind the scenes is draft position's more important than winning this game, that's a fact, especially when you're not going to the postseason. What do you think Seattle's doing right now by not addressing the quarterback position this offseason?
Well, as we've said, though, Hut, not doing something to your roster is different than not doing something on game day.
And but
they did nothing on game day according to the league.
Yes, they're done with the tanking thing. They did not tank. It is over and done with. The point here, though, is it is Stephen Ross claiming, guys, I was joking. I was joking about the $100,000 bribe to Flores, and Flores is saying he's not joking, but where it looks bad is, was Brian Flores legitimately fired because he didn't tank? That's the issue the league would have. After the fact, later on, was this the biggest reason? Because Stephen Ross, and you said it, he's right. Draft position does matter at that point in the season more than winning games. If he is repeating that line around the office to everyone that'll listen and saying to Brian Flores, and Brian Flores can later prove that that's why he was fired.
Yeah.
Because he didn't bow down and give in to the integrity of the game and tried to win and tried his best. That's a problem for Stephen Ross.
I don't think it has to be.
But I don't know how they prove that.
Right.
And again, because the race card was thrown in here, it blurs everything with all of this.
And I don't think it has to be the sole reason he's fired, right, Chad? Is it 70%? Is it 60%? If it's a significant percentage of it, it's a problem. But again, these are unprovable things. And here's another thing. A lot of these owners are morons, right? I mean, Stephen Ross, as a businessman in commercial real estate and stuff, has done very well. And redoing Hard Rock Stadium has done very well. In a lot of realms has done very well. Has he done some stupid stuff as an owner in the course of this stuff? Yes. And are they willing to accept some stupid stuff? I mean, I can imagine Goodell saying to his cronies inside the building, crap, this is nothing compared to Daniel Snyder. We're lucky.
We're going to go a layer and 2 layers deeper on all of this with Michael McCann from Sportico. He's about to join us. We will get back into Watson and the ruling from Judge Sue L. Robinson as well. Michael McCann, legal expert from Sportico, joins us next. Aurora NutriScience, a trusted partner with OutKick 360. They help us stay mentally sharp and healthy. Aurora delivers your supplements where you need them most, your body. VitaLifeScience.com is the website. VIDALifescience.com is where you can see more information. Our OutKick 360 season ticket holders receive a 15% discount with the code OutKick360. Typical pills, capsules with your vitamins, not well absorbed. In fact, most are only absorbed in your body in small, very small amounts, and your digestive system breaks these pills down until there's little left for you to benefit from. But here's Aurora, unique, cutting-edge, nutritional, and absorbable supplements encapsulated in liposomes that ensure greater absorption in the body's bloodstream. Check out VitaLifeScience.com for more information. VIDALifescience.com. 15% off with the code OutKick360 at VitaLifeScience.com. Time to dive in on the details with the Watson suspension, and this morning news coming out through the league of the fine and the suspension and the docking of the first round and future third round pick for the Miami Dolphins for tampering with Tom Brady and Sean Payton. OutKick 360 rolls on. Michael McCann, legal expert with Sportico. Always nice to join us, especially on a day like today where there is plenty to discuss. Michael, we appreciate it as always.
Hey, thanks for having me back on.
Biggest takeaway in reading the statement and analysis from the league with the Dolphins, what is item 0 for you at the top of the list?
I think their explanation of conversations between Dolphins owner Stephen Ross and Brian Flores jumped out to me as the most important part of that report. And I say that because Flores has said, as we know, that Ross offered to pay him $100,000 to lose every game. That report doesn't contradict that, which I thought was pretty interesting. And the report says, well, it wasn't meant to be taken seriously. If I'm Flores' lawyer, I'm going to say serious to who? I mean, this is, if you're the coach and the owner who could fire you and ultimately did fire him is saying, I'll pay you $100,000 to lose, that doesn't seem like a joke to me. And I know the NFL sort of portrayed it as a joke, but that jumped out to me at least. And also Flores' claims that there was tampering were verified by this report. So this is a good report for Brian Flores.
So let's take it to the next step now for Brian Flores' attorney and legal team. How difficult now is it to prove that he was fired for mostly because he did not lose games the way the owner wanted him to lose games?
Yeah, I think it's going to be hard to prove that because there's so many factors, as we know, that go into hiring and firing. And I think this is sort of a fundamental challenge for Flores, is that it's hard to pinpoint why someone is fired. And owners have a lot of discretion with firing coaches. So to prove that it was because he didn't go along with the tanking scheme is going to be tough. But in a way, he doesn't have to get that far in the case. If he gets to pretrial discovery and there are emails and texts that undermine the league and undermine the Dolphins, that could be problematic for the league and maybe put them in a position where a settlement makes more sense.
What did you make of the $1.5 million fine for Ross in this, and the penalties of the draft picks itself, the first round next year, and then the future third round, in relation to other fines and suspensions that you've seen across the league for owners?
Yeah, so the league is limited to some degree by the Constitution in terms of the amount of fine that can be imposed. In terms of the draft, obviously $1.5 million is a ton of money, but if you're a billionaire, maybe it's not quite as meaningful. I still think it's a lot of money, of course, but in terms of the draft picks, that's where it hurts the Dolphins. We know the Patriots lost draft picks in Deflategate. We know the Saints have been punished. I mean, there are other teams that have had draft pick forfeitures, and I think that really gets to a harm to a team where these draft picks are worth so much. Even if they don't use the pick, we know they can trade them. So that's a pretty steep penalty for the Dolphins to lose a first and a third. And I think the league is really trying to send a message, not only to the Dolphins, but to every other team. Look, you have to take this seriously. Tampering and tanking really undermine the league product. It undermined the idea that teams are playing on a level playing field. If one team is essentially cheating, and we know the Dolphins aren't the first to do this, so I'm not trying to necessarily pick on them, but they're the ones that are issued here. Other teams have a stake in seeing penalties be imposed that are meaningful.
2.5 months away from the team doesn't seem like a heck of a lot. Do you find that punitive in that regard?
I don't. And I think, Paul, you're getting to the idea that what is an owner suspension? What does that even actually do? I mean, the owner's obviously not playing. They're not coaching. They can't go to their facility. I mean, they can still watch the game at home. I think, honestly, it's more stigmatizing. It's a way of saying, we're tarnishing you in a way that you've been held wrong. You've been held to have engaged in wrongful conduct, and we're excluding you from this club of owners. In a way, I think the sort of social stigma to that might be more meaningful. But I agree, it doesn't really do anything to have an owner not physically able to show up. I mean, I think it's more symbolic and stigmatizing than anything else.
When you read through the 16 pages of Sue L. Robinson's report, from a legal standpoint, and it's clearly a legal document when she's going through all the allegations and what could be proven and what could not be proven, what jumped out to you the most in her argument about sexual assault, what is sexual assault, and also the burden of proof in the case with the NFL?
Yeah, I thought she did a good job of explaining the distinction between saying what Watson did was wrong and coming up with a penalty that matches what the rules say. And she's obviously been criticized, the idea that he's not being punished severely enough. But her report makes clear that she found his behavior egregious. She said it was predatory conduct. She used pretty strong words. But the problem for the NFL, as she wrote, is that they're arguing for a penalty that goes against precedent, that isn't collectively bargained, and there isn't a league document that verifies that that's the appropriate penalty. She's really saying, in essence, look, NFL, you and the Players Association, if you think you want to punish, suspend a player for a year plus an indefinite period thereafter, and I would say that's a ban. If you're punished at least a year plus an indefinite period, that means you could be gone forever, potentially. And she said there's no textual support for that kind of penalty. So I thought she did a good job of explaining her reasoning. I know, again, she's been criticized, but as a lawyer, I would say it was a logical document, even if the outcome maybe isn't fair. Maybe he should be punished more. I get that, but at the same time, she has to follow the law. We want judges to apply the law, right? We don't want them creating new laws on the bench. We hear that all the time. I think she stuck by that.
Michael McCann is the legal expert at Sportico, among other titles, and his great background, and you can follow him on Twitter at McCann Sports Law.
So the league doesn't get to break precedent based on her ruling. Do you think that is a big rationale, perhaps, for them appealing this and getting it in the hands of Goodell or his designee, because they can up it and create a new precedent for the next time?
Yeah, they could do that, but the risk with that option is we know Watson's going to sue if they do that. I mean, he's made it all but clear. He also hired Jeffrey Kessler, who Tom Brady used, who also defeated the NCAA 9-0 at the Supreme Court. Watson and the Players Association are prepared to go to court. So yeah, the NFL can do that, and Goodell can elevate the suspension to a season plus an indefinite period or 12 games or whatever, and he will be applauded by, I think, most of the public. Most would say that's right, that the penalty should be higher. The problem with that strategy is it goes to court, and we know the NFL has won disputes with players in court, but I would say a couple things. One is this is different. The other, Tom Brady didn't have Sue Robinson. Adrian Peterson didn't have Sue Robinson. Ezekiel Elliott didn't have Sue Robinson. This is a game changer. This changes the facts, where there's now a retired federal judge who is essentially saying the NFL is making up a new policy as it goes, and that it didn't provide notice to Watson that if you commit this infraction, as egregious as it is, here's the penalty. So yeah, the NFL can do that, but the NFL has to be prepared to go to court to argue that too, I would say. So to me, that changes the calculus.
And while that's going on, he could, in effect, play, I would presume. And I guess what you're also saying, Michael, is based on the element of Sue Robinson in this case, he has a chance to actually win the appeal if he were to sue the league, unlike Brady, who did not win but still played while he was waiting on that appeal to go through the court system.
Yeah, and Jonathan, with Brady, you're right, he lost. He did win at the district court level, and he got one of the three appellate judges. That's still a loss. I'm not, a loss is a loss. It wasn't a shutout. And you change who's the judge on the appellate level, the outcome might have been different. But I would say here, yeah, I mean, this is a risk to the NFL. Do they want a case that will likely go to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit that will go into 2023? Maybe they do. Maybe they believe that that's the long-term calculus. But it also means that this isn't going away. Just like Brady's case went on for a year, this case likely would be poised to do the same.
Would your legal advice, if the NFL came to you and asked what to do in this case, would it be to just sit with the policies that you've put in place and allow this suspension to be upheld and let someone else, a third party that has done this for a living, adjudicate whatever penalties happen with discipline across the league?
Yeah, I mean, my gut is that they appeal, but it's like 60-40. I don't feel certain about it like I did in the past. And I would tell the NFL, look, he's suspended 6 games. I know that's not enough, that the league wanted more. I know the public demands more, but there is a risk moving forward. You'll win the battle, right? The battle is Roger Goodell or a designee, here's the appeal. And the suspension goes up and the NFL will be applauded and there'll be favorable media coverage. I mean, there'll be all of that. I would say, what about what happens next? What happens next is there's litigation and it goes to federal court. And suddenly, if you didn't do a good job explaining why Sue Robinson, a retired federal judge for more than a quarter of a century, who wrote a pretty logical opinion that she got it wrong, this goes now to a federal judge who is going to take, I think, a closer look at this than what occurred in previous cases. So I would tell the league, be reticent here. This is not an easy path ahead if you challenge it.
How did you interpret her opinion on the fact that he did not go on the commissioner's list last season and, for lack of a better way, the time served by not playing, and the fact that he wasn't on that list that would have accounted for games missed based on how they handled it a year ago compared to right now? And also the fact that she also put in there that he could win an argument if he used, and I think they may have done this, and correct me on the details, that not only the players and how they've treated the players, but how they've treated owners that have been disciplined in the past compared to players in this situation, regardless of the fact that there's a CBA overseeing the players in this.
Yeah, so I think the point about the commissioner's exempt list is important because he wasn't put on it, and the league could have put him on it. It didn't. Now, I know I've read that it was because he didn't want to play for the Texans, that this is a more complicated scenario than just merely their allegations. But look, words matter, and if there's no hidden suspension, there's no hidden commissioner's exempt list. If he should have been considered punished in the past, then the classification should have been there. It should have been he's on the commissioner's exempt list. It can't be, to use her words, retroactively applied. And she made a big point of that, retroactive. It's sort of the criticism of the NFL is that there's kind of going back in time to change the rules and changing them to when the conduct occurred. You can't do that. Just like if someone breaks the law and then the public says, well, I can't believe the defendant is only sentenced to 10 years in prison for what they did. Well, if the statute says it's 10 years, the judge can't say, well, this is really bad, I'm going to make it 30 years. We don't allow that. And I think she used the same logic here.
Do you read that and think that she's saying, based on the retroactive aspect of this, that the suspension would have been a season and 6 games? Is that how you view it? Or do you view it as if last year would have been on the exempt list, then the fact that he didn't go on that, it could have been 0 here? Is it less or more based on her statement?
Yeah, I don't think she clarified that. I mean, I think we have to sort of infer from what she said. I think, to me, her larger point was, we can't say he's on the exempt list when he wasn't. I guess if he had been on it, then that would be considered some sort of sanction, although the exempt list is structured so that the player is not considered to have broken any rules, but is only separated from the team because they're accused of it. Just like in a workplace administrative leave, when there's an employee accused of misconduct, the company is investigating, we sort of separate the employee from the company without a finding of fact. So I don't know if there's even this case if he had been on the exempt list. I think it really just changes history.
Is there any way for Goodell or any commissioner to win when he's policing the owners who employ him? You get any sense of if ownership is happy, if the rest of ownership wants him to put his foot down on somebody like Ross, on somebody like Snyder, or how delicate a balance you think that is there when he's disciplining his bosses?
Yeah, you got it. I think it's real tough. I think it's tough for a commissioner to discipline the one audience that can fire him. Right? That's really, at the end of the day, they decide his employment in ways that no other constituency can, including even Congress. And I think, to defend Goodell just for a moment, I think he would say he has punished owners. Jim Irsay was punished years ago. And also I think he has claimed that Snyder was effectively punished by being separated from control of the team, that his wife is now controlling the team. At least Goodell has sort of framed that as a sort of punishment. But yeah, look, I mean, it's fair to say, I think players can say it does seem as if there's inequity where owners are treated more favorably than players. But the counter argument is the players are governed by a CBA, owners are governed by a separate document, the league constitution. It's also hard to force an owner to leave. I think that's the other part of this. It's not as if saying, well, we don't want Daniel Snyder to own the Washington team, that we can just make him go away. It's almost impossible. We've never seen it. You got to get 3/4 of owners to agree to get rid of someone they probably know pretty well. And who knows what other owners have done that could merit their own scrutiny. So, yeah, it's a tough spot, but this is the nature of leagues.
I was under the assumption, and I think many were, especially late in the fall, winter of this storyline, that if he settled, that would be used against him. And by her phrasing of restitution, and that was a mitigating factor. It helped him in many ways. At least that's how I interpreted this yesterday. Did you do the same, or is she referencing something else completely separate of the settlements?
Yeah, no, I think she's referencing that because it's not clear what else it would. I think as you're getting, it's hard to know what else that would be other than that. So it did play a factor. And look, if he had settled these cases early on, then the NFL would have been in a really tough spot to investigate, because the settlements would have presumably included non-disclosure agreements. So it would have made it very hard for media to investigate it. It's a very different story had he. I mean, obviously, I'm playing Monday morning quarterback, but right. I mean, this is what happens when you don't settle.
And it's very interesting because at the Super Bowl, Goodell said he did not place Watson on the exempt list because he was waiting on the legal process to play out one way or the other. And had he settled, I think the assumption was he'd go on the exempt list and not just stay and getting paid $10 million with Houston for doing nothing. But in fact, had that happened, now the judge in this case is saying that actually is a mitigating factor that helped in his overall suspension. It's a very fascinating view on it, because I think many thought it would hurt him if he did that.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, the timeline worked out in a way that the exempt list ends up playing sort of a surprisingly important role. Where
you think Rusty Hardin knew that?
No, I mean, maybe, I don't know. I think my gut is no, because I don't think they knew what Judge Robinson was going to do. I mean, this is, the NFL was asking for a historic punishment. A different disciplinary officer might have gone along with it. A different disciplinary officer might have said, well, there's nothing in the CBA that says the NFL can't do this. I mean, there's a risk going to this process, and a different retired judge might have had a very different ruling.
Final 60 seconds here. To me, if you're going to appeal this, it's all or nothing. If the league wants a full year, if I'm Goodell, I give him the full year. I don't think there's a big difference between 8 games and 6 games, or 12 games and 6 games, if you're trying to set a precedent. If you're appealing it and you're going to rule one way, and you're effectively saying it's okay for him to play week 1, we're going to go through the legal battle, I'd go all in instead of just floating out a 12-game suspension and trying to have him back in December. I don't know how you feel about that, but legally, that's how I would go about it.
Yeah, I think if the suspension goes from 6 to 10 or 12, I think the reaction is going to be, was it worth that? Especially because he'll probably sue with any change, any elevation of the penalty. I think he'll sue. So, is it worth the league's sort of risk to just elevate it by 4 or 6 games? I think you're right, Jonathan. I think it's go for the year plus. Go for what they wanted, which is a year plus an indefinite period. And the league could say, we've never had a situation like this. This is what they've been arguing, that there's no precedent and there's nothing that precludes the NFL from coming up with this punishment. Obviously, Judge Robinson saw it differently, and so does the Players Association. But yeah, I think for sort of an incremental increase doesn't seem like it's probably worth that inevitable legal fight.
Michael McCann, Sportico legal expert. It is worth the admission to the site for his legal analysis on all things NFL, which has been the offseason of everything in the court system. Michael, thank you as always for the perspective. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Talk to you guys later.
Yep. MLB trade deadline details next on OutKick 360. We're diving headfirst back into the NFL news with John McClain in less than 7 minutes. We're glad you're with us across the OutKick network. Today's also the deadline for trades across Major League Baseball. That comes across at 5 o'clock. So we wait out the next couple hours, but really the breaking news is done. Soto is a Padre or is headed that way. And the big news yesterday, right as we went off the air, the Braves signing Austin Riley to a record contract in Atlanta. A lot of news, guys, about to go down officially in the next couple hours.
10 years, well over $200 million for Austin Riley, Braves third baseman.
Weren't able to rip him off like South or Central America.
Yeah, but either way, I mean, they've got Ozzie Albies, they've got Ronald Acuna Jr., and they've got Austin Riley locked up for a long time. They got Matt Olson, who's also only 27 years old, at first base for the next 5 years. That was the trade-off with the Freddie Freeman deal, was they sign Olson to 6 years. The 6 years they would not promise Freddie Freeman because he's 5 years younger than Freddie Freeman, and he's having a great season also. And I'll give it up to the Padres. That is a small market team that has never won a title, that goes for it. I mean, we can sit and make fun that, hey, they're still this many games behind the Dodgers. They're never going to win anything.
Bravo.
But at least they are going chips on the table. They're going all. They get Soto and Josh Bell
and in
from
the
the
meantime,
Nationals in
the
this trade.
Dodgers move is to give up something for Joey Gallo.
Gallo
I mean, they
to
gave
LA.
up a middling minor league pitcher, Clayton Beater, but the Yankees actually moved his contract. I don't know if they took some of it, but I would have been content for them cutting it.
Paul, do you view today as the guys who are in the postseason race versus out?
Well, certainly the ones who intend to be in. I'm pleased with what my team did.
John McClain with NFL headlines.
I bet he's pleased
as
too about
we
his Astros.
return. A lot to hit across the National Football League. He's with us in 4 minutes. Newsworthy day across the NFL. OutKick 360 rolls on across the OutKick network with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine live in Nashville each and every day. We've got you in the afternoon from our 6th and Peabody studios and across our great radio partners as well here on the OutKick network. Crew's all here, and every Tuesday at this time we're joined by the Hall of Famer, John McClain, who joins us to talk all things NFL. And no lack for meat on the bone today. John, great to have you back on this week. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing very well, guys. What a news day. Not just the last 2 days, really, with the NFL, Major League Baseball trade deadline. Don't you wish the NFL trade deadline was like baseball? Can you imagine? And it's, of course, you guys get to talk about it. I only get to talk about it here. But, with Stephen Ross, that kind of was a bombshell. Nobody was anticipating it, where we all were anticipating Deshaun Watson. And I think probably about 80 to 90% of us thought it was too lenient.
Is the timing of it peculiar at all? Did they drop this to get us to stop talking about Deshaun Watson?
Well, first of all, it's not going to get people to stop talking about him. Now, if they don't appeal, if Goodell doesn't appeal to Goodell, then they're going to get blasted more. Roger Goodell doesn't care. You make $68 million a year. You can take any slings and arrows from any direction, but there'll be an outcry, because to think that Calvin Ridley got a season for betting, $1,250 using his name. DeAndre Hopkins had just a trace of an illegal substance in his system. He got 6 games. It's history is littered with people that got as much or more than Deshaun Watson, even though his case was unprecedented in the history of sports at any level. And, when you read Judge Robinson's opinion, you're reading it, wow, she's tearing him up. Man, she's just killing him. He must be gone for, only 6 games? Wow.
John, I want a 2-part question here, and I want to start with the system that's in place based on the collective bargaining agreement, where both sides agree to the independent nature of how this went about, which was different than the previous CBA that was in place, where Goodell was the judge, jury, and executioner from the jump. Do you agree? My thought is, whenever the NFL's looking at this, they're thinking, okay, if there's an appeal process, it goes before Goodell, and the player or the NFLPA will be the one appealing the judgment from the judge or the independent person that's overseeing the case. You think I'm crazy to think they never expected in a situation like this that they'd be appealing to themselves?
Well, I think when it was set up, of course they knew they were going to appeal to themselves. Why the players agree to that, give them a few more days off in the off season and have practices that are easier, and they agreed to it. And why they let Goodell be the final word on anything like this is beyond me, but they did. And really, the only reason I can think is that he would not appeal it and extend it a couple games would be because it's Judge Robinson's first time. And I think he wouldn't want to look like he disagreed with her, even though almost everybody other than Browns fans are disagreeing with her. He wanted a season. He wanted indefinite, and it's only 6 games. So, it's because of the quote unquote non-violent nature that she didn't throw the book at him. But it's like somebody said, if she was in the room with Watson, she might think differently about that. But it's a process that's just been agreed on in 2020. And if he undermines her, people are going to question the process. It's almost like a no-win situation other than Deshaun Watson. And if he doesn't extend it, it means Watson got another happy ending.
Well, I saw that tweet yesterday, which was amazing that you posted at McClain_on_NFL. John, the second part here, Goodell's in a tough spot because so you mentioned extending it for a couple games or whatever it might be. I think if the league decides to appeal and it goes before Goodell, they are deciding that Watson is playing this year while the NFLPA and Watson sue the league for coming back over the top in a mega way. I think the only way you appeal it is to set the future precedent. And the only way to do that, in my opinion, is to go all in and be extreme the other way, where you come back with indefinite suspension. You know it's going to go then to an appeals court, which is going to allow Watson to play, but so be it, because you're setting future precedent for suspensions of this nature. If you're not serious about really setting that tone, then to me, you go along with Judge Sue Robinson and how the process played out, because the one thing we can't say is that it was an independent judge overseeing this, which is what both sides agreed to in the first place.
Always knowing that Goodell has the final word. And it's interesting because federal judges are going to kick it back to him, say, hey, you bargained this. It's your problem, not ours. And so that takes forever. So then maybe his suspension goes into effect next season when he's making $45 million, and that would hit him where it hurts. And then the Browns would redo his contract again. It's amazing. As someone who's been through this from the get-go, I thought sure he'd get at least 8 games for a while. I thought it would be a season. Then when the Judge Robinson said the league wanted an indefinite suspension for a full season at least, and I thought, man, it's going to be more than 6. And I understand her reasoning, but call it egregious. And I mean, the things that she wrote about Deshaun Watson were incredible. She just eviscerated him, said he did it for sex, not for therapeutic reasons. He went in thinking about sex, and then to only give him 6 games is outrageous.
What's, John, been the reaction in Houston, a city that saw the best of this guy, both on the field and off the field before the scandal came out, and where, this has been as hot a topic as anywhere, and where he sat out last year while he was healthy, while this whole thing hung over his head?
Paul, going back to the first day of practice on Friday, because everybody's anticipation of her ruling, people talked about it all through camp. Like, oh, look at that throw to Davis Mills. Hey, I wonder if the judges ruled anything yet, and getting on their cell phones to see if there's any news. And then, of course, when it came out yesterday, that's all anybody was talking about. Today, that's all anybody was talking about. And it is a hot topic, as you can imagine. The Texans play him in December the 4th. And people want to know, will he be playing the Texans in NRG Stadium? And right now, he will. And I'm guessing even if Goodell extends it, he will. And that'll be the biggest regular season game the Texans have had since the first game in franchise history when they beat the Cowboys.
John, if you're the NFL and you're just trying to not step in it, everything's going great from a financial standpoint. Your league is in a great spot. You just don't want to step into a PR nightmare. Why on earth would Roger Goodell want to involve himself when he's got an out now, where there's a third-party person who has done criminal justice for a living, putting out the fines, putting out the suspension, everything else? Why would Roger Goodell want to then step in on top of that and take away from that ruling? Is it power? Is it trying to lean into something that's going to get a better response from media if he goes harder on Deshaun Watson with this? What would compel him to appeal this?
Because it'd be the right thing to do, because 6 is incredibly lenient for a guy that had 66 women massaging him over a 17-month period. And it wasn't just 25 that filed suit. There was others that came forward and said he did, but they didn't file suit, which makes me think he paid him money. I'm wondering how many did he pay money not to file civil suits? And the NFL has this information. And here's another thing. I heard a thing this morning on, I can't remember what network. I was listening on the way to training camp, and somebody said, this was a national guy, that the owners might just want it to go away and focus on football. Owners want to do the Haslam family any favors whatsoever. The owners are angry at the Haslams because that $230 million guaranteed contract. They're not going to do him any favors. And maybe some of those influential owners, and they are Goodell's boss, are saying to him, hey, bud, you need to give him a few more games. That's not enough. And then the union, of course, argued there are different standards for players and owners. And I'm sure they used Bob Kraft as an example. Well, Bob Kraft, his deal was with one place, one woman. And this is, as I mentioned earlier, unprecedented in the history of sports. They're not the same case. And Goodell doesn't care about a PR nightmare. He's already got one. And every time, this sounds terrible, but the NFL is in the news constantly, whether it's positive or negative, and it gets people's attention. And all those advertisers see how many people are checking out the NFL, even if it's bad. And these things like Watson, can you imagine how many people have been listening to you guys, watching you guys, reading when I was writing for the Houston Chronicle, the columns I did so often. And I don't think there's no PR nightmare the NFL couldn't overcome unless it was tanking.
Yeah, bottom line is more people are going to watch the Cleveland Browns now when Deshaun Watson comes back, and it's only going to help the NFL in the long run. And that's not necessarily the right thing. And I don't disagree with you, John, that it may be the right thing to do to give him more of a punishment. But what Roger Goodell is paid to do is to do the right thing for the NFL and all 32 owners at all times. So I'll ask it to you this way. What's the right thing to do for the league and harmony with the NFLPA and moving forward towards the season right now? Would it be to appeal and add on to that in terms of all teams, or would it be to sit back and allow this to happen from the league perspective?
The easiest thing to do would do nothing. Take all the criticism that's coming now, and then Watson walks away, the week regular season starts, and he disappears for 6 weeks, and then all eyes are going to be on him again in anticipation of him coming back and playing the Ravens and the Bengals. I would imagine that Stephen Biscotti and Mike Brown, the owners of the Ravens and Bengals, are saying, Raj, give him 2 more games.
No doubt.
How much do you think a new precedent is important to him? Like, is he still in the business of wanting to handle personal conduct and to be the driver of that? And if so, what she relied on here, despite like what you said, you're reading it and thinking, whoa, she's going to lay down the hammer here. And ultimately she says, I've got to rely on the precedent that's out there. And the precedent is 6 games. The next person then is going to rely on that precedent. If the league wants that to change, the way they can do it is for him to overrule that, set the new precedent, fight it in court where they generally win, and get a new precedent set for her or whoever takes her role the next time. Where do you think that ranks for them in importance?
I think public opinion is always number one. What do the advertisers think? What do the networks think? Well, we know what CBS thinks. They want him playing. We know what primetime ESPN, NBC, they want him playing, and they pay the freight. So I think this, Watson showed no remorse whatsoever. That Haslam's at a release talking about how remorseful he was. No, he wasn't. He said in the news conference, he had no regrets. He didn't do anything. He didn't hurt anybody. He didn't do any of the things he was being accused of. And a lot of times when people hand down decisions, they want him to show some regret and some remorse. And Watson has yet to do that. And he's going to get hammered when he does his next news conference and say, hey, you said you weren't going to get counseling because you didn't need any, and you're getting counseling. And all these things are said about you. How do you respond? I think they'd be better off saying he's not going to talk about it. But right now, I think from a football standpoint, of course, people want to see play unless you play the Browns. But from a moral standpoint and what he was accused of doing and what she said he did, to me, he just got off really light.
We will pick back up with Watson and the decision that the NFL has to make over the next day and a half on whether or not they're going to appeal the ruling from Judge Sue Robinson. We'll get into that. We'll get into the games missed currently by Deshaun Watson and the schedule makers doing the Browns a favor with the schedule itself for those first 6 games of the season. Then we'll switch gears and get into today's news with the Dolphins and the punishment handed out there. There's a lot to discuss with John McClain as we continue on OutKick 360. And we continue with John McClain, who joins us weekly at this time. OutKick 360 rolls on. So, John, I'm with you, and I hear you on that the other owners are not happy with Haslam and the deal that he gave to Watson and all of the stuff going on. But by appealing this and then ruling, my guess is, and I would, going back to what we discussed, I would go heavy on the suspension if I'm Goodell to set future precedent, even if they're going to sue. They're going to sue if they tack on more games, which, if I'm another owner, would put Watson on the field this year. Because in my mind, it would be similar to the way Brady sued the league and played that year while they wait on the legal process to play out in an appellate court. I mean, do the owners want Jimmy Haslam's quarterback playing week 1 through likely the regular season, and what would be a pretty talented team as is, plus putting Watson in the mix certainly makes things interesting for Cleveland that has more than just regular season aspirations with him. And we need to... Are you muted there, John, potentially? I'm not sure. He's not muted, so we'll see if on our end we can get the audio working. What do you guys say?
No, I'm an idiot.
Oh, there he is.
I'm an idiot. I was muted.
Okay,
sorry,
John, so
sorry about that.
Pick up there on what the owners may think if he's playing week 1, which is what they risk by appealing.
And then they just knock him out 8 to 10 games next year in his second season when he's going to make $45 million instead of like 1.5. And I think that others would encourage him to suspend him more because they do need to set precedent. And I can't imagine any owners telling that's enough. Most of them got their own problems, and they're probably tired of hearing about Watson, just like everybody is. And the thing about the owners, are certain owners that Goodell listens to more, like Jerry Jones, Robert Kraft, Stan Kroenke, some of those guys, Mike Brown, the guys that the Rooney family, Art Rooney Sr., those are Jr., those guys are his confidants. And I think they will give him what he would consider valuable advice when he makes the decision. And they're the ones not going to get ripped when he keeps it at 6. He will, but when that's what he's paid all that $68 million for, is to stand there and take the bullets for them.
John, let's look at the schedule. The first 6 games as it stands right now, Watson's going to miss. They open up at Carolina, home against the Jets, home against the Steelers, on the road against Atlanta, and then home against the Chargers, followed by another home game against the Patriots. Right now, October 23rd, Week 7, is when Watson would be allowed to play a regular season game. He could, of course, return to the facility after Week 3 going into Week 4. But it's not out of the question to think that the Browns can go 3-3 with Brissett with that schedule and be squarely in the mix going into Week 7, only having played one division game. They can still win the AFC North regardless of the suspension and as it sits right now without Watson.
Keep in mind, they got a great running game, got a good offensive line, they got good enough receivers, they got a lot of talent on defense. They'll do like the Titans, run, and run some more. And they tell Jacoby Brissett, just don't lose it. Run the ball, do whatever you have to do. Brissett is experienced. He's playing different systems. A lot of time they told him just manage it. You don't have to win it. So, of course, they can tread water there. But the one I'm most interested in, of course, is the first one in Baker Mayfield. And if they can get fired up enough in Matt Rule's 3rd season with the Panthers to pull an upset in the first game. And think about Watson coming back. Remember, he hadn't played since 2020. I think people would be foolish to expect him to just come off a suspension when he hadn't played since the first week of January in 2021 and expect him to be great. He could be playing, when he plays that first game at home, think it's against Cincinnati, he can have incredibly bad weather. And I don't mean snow and cold, just bad wind. He played a game there in 2020 in which the wind and rain were so bad they evacuated the stadium. Fortunately, it was during the pandemic, so they didn't have to do 72,000. And he couldn't throw the ball 5 yards. Baker Mayfield couldn't throw it 3. So he really struggled. And when he eliminated Cleveland right off the bat, well, I was writing and talking about he did that because he has one game he's played there, and it was terrible for a quarterback. And so I think it would be unfair to expect him to come back and play great right away. So there's no guarantee they're going to win those first two games against the Bengals and the Ravens when he's back.
$230 million guaranteed, John. I don't know if you heard. That does away with the wind. It's no longer windy in Cleveland. Let's move on to Miami, where found guilty of tampering with Tom Brady and Sean Payton. Ross gets docked 2 big draft picks, a first-rounder next year, a third-rounder the following year, and then other stuff that doesn't seem so significant. Suspended through October 17th. The poor guy can't go to his office, can't go to any league meetings until the 2023 annual meeting, and he's fined $1.5 million, a huge sum for a billionaire. But they're taking tampering seriously here. Obviously, the 2 draft picks are significant if the other stuff isn't. This send a big enough message to you not to mess around with anybody who's under contract, especially when it's a Tom Brady, Sean Payton caliber person?
First thing I thought about, should there be some kind of penalty for Brady and Payton when he comes back if they were talking to him illegally, especially Brady?
It's interesting.
And I haven't seen anybody bring that up. The fact is, Don Yee, Brady's agent, was talking to him. So I wonder how Mike McDaniel, the new coach, and Tua Tagovailoa feel, knowing that your owner didn't want you. He wanted Brady, and he didn't want the new coach. He wanted Sean Payton, and I don't blame him. He wouldn't like to have Brady and Payton. And it's so funny. He's delusional. Ross is saying that he was exonerated on all the charges of tanking. If you read the decision, he was not. But all the fines came from the tampering, not the tanking. And so I think maybe the NFL didn't say, yes, he tanked. They said they couldn't find anybody that said they knew it was serious, because the last thing you want the public to think when you're trying to reap $100 billion benefit over 5 years from gambling is something might not be on the up and up.
Does this report help Brian Flores in his claim that he was fired basically because he refused to lose games?
Could have been. And the one thing somebody needs to remind Stephen Ross is you could have had Justin Herbert and you blew it and you took Tua Tagovailoa. But I think, yes. Now, what I'm curious about, when Brian Flores and his attorneys went public, they said they had indisputable evidence that he was asked to tank. Well, where was the indisputable evidence?
John, just going back to the tampering, do you really think that the Bucs didn't do the exact same thing in 2019?
Oh, I don't have any idea.
I mean, I think there were at least 3 teams.
It goes on all the time. It goes on all the time.
They did it better.
Well, and without Brian Flores, Tom Brady's in Miami right now, and so is Sean Payton, and this doesn't get out.
Remember Flores, when they showed Brady on the other yacht, it was pretty stupid of Ross to do that, because then you brought somebody else into it instead of just keeping it between him and Brady and Don Yee.
Well, and John,
Miami would have had to have traded for both, though.
Yeah,
but
what's interesting in the report to me is that they acknowledge that he said the $100,000 thing. That they went to the extent of we made sure to tell them that even if you're joking, if your intent is not, I'm actually going to pay you $100,000 to lose games, it's important that words matter when you're the owner, and you can't do it. So I'm reading all this and thinking, man, this helps Brian Flores' claim. Not that Stephen Ross is racist, but that he was making it clear to everyone around the building that they needed to lose because their draft position mattered more than winning late in the season, even though it was proven the Dolphins didn't intentionally tank under Brian Flores.
And they passed up Justin Herbert when they had a chance. Cadillac, you're right. I think everybody around the Dolphins office is probably chuckling, shaking their head like they can't believe that they didn't get in more trouble. They got off easy. One thing to remember, didn't they give up 5 picks for Tyreek Hill? But I think they still have the 49ers #1 pick, which should be low. So they're not going to be totally destitute in the draft.
Yeah, and the the 2021. There's two different examples of the tampering. The one was with the New England Patriots in 2019. The most recent one was December of last year, whenever the discussions were about Don Yee and Mr. Brady is how they address him in this. After the 2021 season, he was under contract with the Bucs. Those discussions began in December, and they focused on him becoming a limited partner in the Dolphins and possibly serving as a football executive. And then if he wanted to play, they could explore that as well, the possibility of playing. I think it's pretty clear. As I read this, it had just hit me. This is how the news got out that he was planning on retiring. It came through Miami because he was about to become an executive in Miami. And this was discussed in December, and the news got out in early January that Brady was retiring, right after he lost in the playoffs. I don't know if you made the same correlation, but I've been trying for months to link this up on who leaked it. And to me, the leak came from Miami.
And then he had to become a limited partner with Fox. And I think that this all goes back to when Brady was at Michigan, and Ross is one of their biggest benefactors. And so obviously he's kept close tabs on his career, especially since he had to play against him twice a year while he was with the Patriots. And they're probably friends. You know, if Brady's going to hit on somebody's yacht and Ross is his doc there, they must hang out together. So I don't blame Ross in wanting Sean Payton, and I don't blame him in wanting Tom Brady. But if you break the rules, you know, you're going to pay the penalty. And the money is, you know, Paul mentioned, that's tip money for a multi-billionaire. It doesn't mean squat. The draft choices do mean a lot, especially since they paid so dearly to get Tyreek Hill. You know, what are they going to do if Tua doesn't work? Then they're going to need to get another quarterback. Oh, let's package all these draft. Oh, we don't have draft picks to package. So this could have ramifications beyond this year as far as the Dolphins on the playing field.
Well, Brady will be a free agent, so that saves him trading.
Yeah, then they can tamper with his Fox contract. You know? And I don't know if they can match it.
You guys got some great lines.
John McClain with us. Speaking, let's stay in Miami briefly. Today, Miami Dolphins fans, they realize that their owner is trying to bring Sean Payton to town, which, by the way, they asked for permission after tampering. They did ask for permission to speak with him, and it was denied, so it wouldn't have mattered anyway. And now Payton can retire, stay out a year, and then go wherever he wants to. And Miami can give up whoever knows what the compensation might be if New Orleans tries to stop it again, which they will. Point being, Dolphins fans are looking at this going, we could have Sean Payton and Tom Brady in some capacity possibly playing. And instead we have Mike McDaniel and Tua Tagovailoa. What are they thinking?
First of all, if I'm them, I'm thinking, okay, Brady's greatest quarterback of all time, but man, we could have had Justin Herbert, who might become the best quarterback in the NFL. And remember when John Gruden went to Tampa, they gave up 2 1s, 2 2s, and $8 million. And you can't trade first round picks beyond 3 years. So I don't know what the Dolphins would do, but I'll guarantee you where he's not going. He's not going to Miami. Everybody's still going to Cowboys because it's a done deal. And I asked some friends that cover the Cowboys what they thought Mike McCarthy had to do to keep his job, and they said go to the Super Bowl.
John, it's training camp horror story time of year right now. You get some very negative reports early on in training camp. The Giants are a complete bleep show on offense. Baker Mayfield is throwing into quadruple coverage and throwing multiple interceptions in camp with Carolina. Of all the things you read across the league, is there anything that comes to mind first that you actually pay a little bit more attention to than others this time of year with the stories that you've seen with some of the negativity going on with certain camps?
Like my first training camp was 1977, and I learned a long time ago, don't pay any attention to what's happening the first week of training camp. And you'll see things, especially with a quarterback, like, oh my God, this one practice this week, they went crazy here. The media did, because Davis Mills had too many checkdowns. And I'm like, well, that's good, because he's going to have a bunch of them during the regular season. He might as well practice them now. My things that I look for, I know some great stories about training camp throughout the decade. I used a player who would, when they did 2-3 hour practices in camp in the heat, and they were actually difficult, not like today where they're patty cake. The guy'd take a Bible and beat on his knee till it swells, so he didn't have to do 2 a days. And one time with the Oilers, Mike Rozier, running back, let a leopard loose on the rookie's floor, and they're lucky all of them didn't get hurt. So I used to go on the road, and they used to have fun at camp. I start paying more attention, Chad, when they start playing, and not the veteran quarterbacks or veteran players, but the rookies, especially the high picks around the league. I want to see how they're doing. I'm really interested in Kenny Pickett, the only first-round pick quarterback. I'm interested in Malik Willis, because the teams I pay attention to the most are the Texans and the Titans. And then the other teams in the AFC South. I want to see what if the Jaguars look like such a mess, even though they've got the antithesis of Urban Meyer in Doug Peterson. So I'm looking for the teams that changed a lot, not the teams that preserve mostly the status quo, and also the teams that have brought in quarterbacks and are hoping to turn around their franchise.
Quick note on Willis, since he brought him up. He led a 8-play field goal drive today for the Titans in practice in a move the ball period. He threw 1 pass, completed. He ran for 2 first downs. The rest of it was run. He's swimming right now, as you would expect.
Also, John, you're going to have to wait on your Jaguars headline, at least from a preseason perspective. They've already told us that Trevor Lawrence will not be playing in the Hall of Fame game. And who knows?
Nor will ETN.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. And who knows who else, right? Let's go back briefly. How did Rozier get the leopard to begin with?
He was out somewhere, and there was a circus in town in San Angelo, Texas, way out in West Texas. And he met a guy, and the guy he had a leopard that he used in the circus.
Got a great leopard guy. Get it at cost.
His name was Cowboy.
Below cost.
Of course.
And so he talked him in. They go to the dorm. It's right before curfew. At the end of every hallway on every floor was a common room with an old black and white TV and a bunch of chairs. And so they went on the elevator, and when the doors opened, that trainer let Cowboy loose. Now they had a muzzle on him, but the poor leopard was scared to death, just charged off the elevator. And I was 1 floor up, and I heard screaming. And I thought back then, I didn't know what was happening. I ran down flight stairs, ran down the hallway. The players were screaming, climbing on top of furniture, doing everything they could. And Rozier told me what he'd done. And I ran back and dictated his story right on deadline. And I won an award for story on deadline because of Cowboy the Leopard.
John took video with his cell phone, immediately got it out on every social media.
Some guy named Cowboy that had the leopard. I love that story. So, John, you know Warren Moon well, and if anyone knows about racially motivated ideas about the quarterback position and how it can affect one's career, it is definitely Warren Moon. There's no doubt about it. He has come out and said that he believes the Kyler Murray contract part of this about studying is in part racially motivated by the Cardinals and how they view Kyler Murray, the quarterback. What did you make of that statement, knowing how well you know Warren Moon and his career?
I've known Warren since 1983, and his first year with the Oilers was 1984. And throughout my 10 years of covering him, I did a lot of stories about him and race, because he experienced incredible racism in Houston when he came there, and they were terrible, and he didn't play well in 1984 and 85. And anytime I've wanted someone to weigh in on race, I call Warren, because I know it's important to him. And I can see how he would think that, because he's always said, the reason there are not more black quarterbacks, they don't think we're as smart. They don't think we study as much. They don't think we get as much out of it. Now, I think that's not proven true anymore, because there are so many black quarterbacks, but putting that in there to try to get him to do more studying of game film is insulting to him and insulting to that organization that they couldn't get him to do it anyway. And so wisely they removed it, but they sure took a big hit on that.
Well,
He
here's
signed it.
I'd like to know, John, is that, yes, he signed it, but was there any give and take with agent and organization in that clause? Or was it just, we're signing it, no problem, I do that anyways, and then later when it got out, it became an issue? I'd love to go back and hear whether or not they were arguing to take that out before they signed it and the Cardinals wouldn't take it out of the contract.
Eric Burkhardt, who's the agent for Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury, I'm sure he didn't want to put it in there. And if somebody asked Murray, why'd you sign it? My retort would be, for $107 million guaranteed and $231 million overall, would you have signed it?
Yes. I also wouldn't have had an issue with it after the fact, even if people had a negative opinion of it. There's so many ways, John, I think the Cardinals and Murray could have handled this after
They should
the
be
fact.
embarrassed.
Better. Well, the Cardinals
should
could have
be
just as easily
embarrassed.
said, it's no knock on him. The guy studies more than 4 hours. He's easily going to reach that. We're simply putting that in for every quarterback now moving forward. This is an Arizona Cardinals decision. It doesn't say anything about Kyler Murray.
Player.
They could have easily deflected from it and said that. They didn't. They remained silent and let this thing build. And then Murray has to come out and defend himself. It just became a big mess.
Oh, it was a mess, and it was an insult to Murray. If they tried to put it in any other quarterbacks, any other contracts, it would cost them a lot of free agents. I know J.J. Watt never would have signed there if they tried to insult him like that.
Well, the other possibility is that maybe there really is an issue that they see with his level of preparation, and now they're not going to say it because they don't want to second guess the guy they just gave all the money to and the contract.
John, but if there's an issue with his level of preparation, what's 4 hours extra going to do for him?
I've always heard while he works hard on the field, he works hard in the weight room, he doesn't study the game plan a lot or the way they want it. Like I think I saw something where he watches videos or something or plays video games while he's watching tape, and that's not what they want. I remember here, David Carr, they didn't like his work habits because he'd leave early and go home and work instead of here studying with his teammates. And but to put it in a clause like that, put it in a clause in a contract like that, just makes them look terrible and him terrible, because now first time he throws an interception and has a bad game, which he will because DeAndre Hopkins is out for 6 games and he struggled without Hop at the end of last season, then people are going to say, he's not studying the game plan the way he should be.
John McClain, Hall of Fame NFL contributor. You can follow him on Twitter at McClain_on_NFL. John, thank you as always. Great to have you back on the show. We'll chat with you soon.
Thanks.
Jonathan, Paul, and Chadlack, thank you guys very much.
John sent me an insane story, too, that I can't even repeat on
same.
air.
Yeah, I got it last night.
That was unbelievably funny to read. So thank you for that, John.
Yes, that's.
Thank you for that story that I'm not going to talk about.
Well, you
on
can
air.
tweet it.
I could, yeah. Maybe I'll do that.
Coming up, we'll discuss A.J. Brown and Deebo Samuel and the contract that A.J. keeps referencing. Plus, there's another NFL issue that's being completely missed by the media because of everything else going on. And it's pretty big based on, if we want to use the word again, precedent that the NFL just recently used for this player. That's next on OutKick 360. Baseball great Curt Schilling will join us in 10 minutes. Jim Leyritz also on today's show. Glad you're with us for OutKick 360 across the OutKick network. So the other potential suspension that's still sitting out there for the NFL is Alvin Kamara. And the precedent set there, they allowed him to play in the Pro Bowl. They let him play before he was arrested, knowing that the police were going to arrest him.
Yeah.
How they handle that is going to be fascinating because the legal process, they have now kicked this can down the road a third time for his trial. And so he will not go before the court as it stands now, and they're likely to delay it again. Right now, it's been delayed another 60 days, which is well into the season. And the precedent set last year with how they handled Deshaun Watson was he's not going to go on any list. And we heard from David Culley, who said if Deshaun Watson wanted to play, we would have played him last year as the head coach of the Houston Texans in studio with us after he was fired.
The word on Alvin was 6 games, the prediction,
Well,
which
you
would
also
fit right in line with that. And the Pro Bowl, they could effectively say, well, we're going to throw away the Pro Bowl anyway. I mean, it was ridiculous that they didn't allow, quote unquote.
They can't say
but
anything.
It's not the NFL.
They'll just be silent on it.
Well, the NFL, as weaselly as it is, could say, wasn't up to us, it was up to the authorities. And I tend to agree with them. The authorities should have arrested him regardless of what the NFL said. If you have cause to arrest a guy, you go arrest him. You don't ask the NFL, hey, would you like us to arrest him before or after your game? I mean, how the hell does the NFL dictate the timetable of an arrest?
As ridiculous as it sounds when Sue L. Robinson has to say there was no clearly defined rule about what Deshaun Watson was doing, and she's having to explain the definition of sexual assault and everything else. Definition. But the league had no definition of this being something that's wrong. As, like, you know, Deshaun Watson didn't know it was wrong or had to be.
Yeah.
I didn't know this was a problem, which is crazy when you read it. There's no problem with saying assault, right? They know exactly what this is. I mean, he stomped on a guy, so they sent a guy to the hospital. The precedent part of it, the precedent part was interesting with Deshaun Watson because she's saying there is precedent being set here because they're now putting in place a rule and we're trying to put in place a suspension for something we haven't seen before. People have beat up other people that played in the NFL before, so I think this is going to be a little bit easier to levy a suspension.
And this is felony battery that
yes.
he was that he's going to trial for. There is apparently video evidence of this that will be shown at this trial. And again,
they love video.
The case has been delayed until October at the earliest, but who knows? We're likely not seeing any definitive answer with him until 2023 at the earliest.
But this is exactly the kind of case that prompted the league to take over player discipline ahead of legal findings. Felony charge, video evidence, clear that he did something, not wanting to wait on a slow legal system. This is what prompted Roger Goodell to change what Paul Tagliabue wasn't doing.
A.J. Brown is still thinking about the trade back in the draft.
Let go.
He points out basically all of us, he's saying all of us, all the receivers that he's talking about who got new money.
Well, the four in particular.
That were mentioned around that time that wanted new contracts, the 2019 crew.
Metcalf, Debo, and McClain.
And A.J. Only one of them was traded, and it was A.J.
He said, and you keep thinking it's me.
And Debo did ask to be traded, and the 49ers said no and opted not to trade him during the draft and signed him to a 3-year extension worth, I believe, just over $50 million guaranteed.
All roughly the same money, A.J. said. Look, he's got a point, but none of them were as belligerent about it as he was.
Did any of them refuse to talk to the team during the negotiation at any point?
It didn't get as sour for any of them as it got for him. That's the fact of the matter. And they thought he was going to be a real problem. But Wentz and Seattle quarterback situation and where am I forgetting?
Washington.
San Francisco don't have the same quarterback situation that the Titans have with Tannehill either in terms of money dedicated, and that's the other big difference.
That was it. It came down to that. A lot of money exchanging today across MLB with extensions, deals, trades, Curt Schilling about to join us. DeGrom makes his debut tonight. He returns on the mound for the Mets. We talk with the pitching great next to lead off hour number 3. OutKick 360 rolls on. Show is flying by today. Final hour is here across the OutKick network. Good afternoon to you from 6th and Peabody in downtown Nashville. Glad you're with us for OutKick 360. Plenty of NFL news, and Major League Baseball's trade deadline comes up in an hour. A lot of news already making the rounds. And the biggest, we were waiting on Soto to be dealt. He's headed to San Diego.
San Diego. Yes.
Padres picking up him, Josh Bell. They're in.
Padres are all in.
They're going for it.
Don't know if it's going to work, but they're trying.
DeGrom is back this evening for the Mets. A lot of headlines across Major League Baseball. And love being on and having the opportunity to talk with two baseball greats coming up this hour. We've got Jim Leyritz in roughly 20 minutes. Right now, we say hello to pitching legend Curt Schilling on OutKick 360. Curt, great to have you on, man. Hope you're well.
I'm good. Thank you, guys.
So DeGrom, the headlines in New York are his return gives the Mets finally their dream rotation. Do you agree? And is it at the perfect time?
So I'm going to caveat this with the fact that I'm a huge DeGrom fan. I love watching guys on that end of the spectrum pitch. But if I'm a Mets front office person, if I'm a Mets baseball ops person, if I'm a Mets fan, I am planning to get to the postseason without Jacob DeGrom in any capacity, just because over the last 2 years, his health has been such an enormous issue. And it never seems to be conventional, tight elbow this or a little shoulder that. It's these things, and you find out as he gets a little bit farther. I don't think people understand how late his career got started, and he's a little bit older than everybody thinks. And so him bouncing back is a huge question mark. At the same time, he's back. So you're going to go turn through the rotation with him and Scherzer both, and that's can't be anything but fun if you're a Mets fan.
Yeah, you were a guy in your career that you wanted to stay in the extra inning. You wanted to work that pitch count up and didn't want to leave the game most of the time. I don't know that you'd be allowed to do that in today's game, the way they manage things. But
yeah, I would have some acrimonious conversations.
No.
But I was raised differently.
Yeah.
I was raised in a sense. You're a starting pitcher every fifth day. That's your 9 innings, and until that 9 innings is done, your job isn't done. And so I took a lot of pride. There was probably no more enjoyable event for me on a baseball field than shaking hands with my catcher on the field after the 9th inning.
Yeah, and so do you see that mentality? I guess one would describe it as old school, but do you see that in any pitcher that you're watching today? None?
No, there's the young kid for the Marlins who
Alcantara
is a horse. Yeah. I mean, the kid, he's somebody in the minor leagues got a hold of him and made him understand. Again, as a starting pitcher, the most important statistic for me was innings. Because if you put 245 innings under your belt, all the other numbers are going to take care of themselves, because you're not going to be out on the mound to get things done if you're not throwing quality innings. And so my spring, every spring when someone would ask you, what's the biggest thing you want to win 20 games this year, and I learned to respond, well, I'm going to make 35 starts, so you tell me which 15 I'm going to lose, because and so you have to kind of, but again, that's in the upbringing, and the fact of the matter is that mentality doesn't exist anymore because organizations don't want it. I think the one tragedy for baseball, I can't. It's hard to watch anymore for me because I can't handle watching the starting pitcher come off the mound in the 6th inning and tipping his hat after getting 16 outs. But the fact of the matter is, the game sabermetrics has I think enhanced and at the same time taken away from the game. It cost the Tampa Bay Rays a World Series, and sabermetrics doesn't translate to October. It never will, and so I think you're going to see teams that understand that, and I think you have to be a forward-thinking. Listen, Theo Epstein and Jed Hoyer, when they came to my house, what seems like 50 years ago, they were so far ahead of the curve when it comes to the sabermetric stuff. But I think one of the things that Theo brought as well was, I think he had a very beginner's understanding of clubhouse chemistry and that intangible that sabermetrics and Ivy League people in baseball cannot put their hands around and wrap their heads around, which is clubhouse chemistry. It's real. It exists. It matters. And today, the trade deadline is one of those days when there's more clubhouse chemistry impact on today than there is at any other time during the season, because you've got a slew of teams who players are saying, what the hell are we doing? We didn't trade for anybody. We're giving up. And then you've got the other teams who, like the Padres, who are, in a sense, all in.
I want to go back over a year to the spider tack controversy and what this meant to pitchers. And it's the first chance I've had to talk to a big-time pitcher since then. When we're talking about Garrett Cole losing 200 RPMs when he was making his adjustment, how many rotations of the ball are we actually talking about? And how much is that actually affecting? I know it's got a lot of mental to it, but how much is it actually affecting the pitch?
Well, I can't answer that. I never used it. It was never,
But how much are those 200 RPMs actually affecting the pitch?
Well, it's a very simple mathematical equation, right? You've got the ball traveling 60 feet, 6 inches in a predetermined period of time. And how many rotations does it actually take between out of your hand and at the plate? It's different for a breaking ball than it is for a fastball. I know that. But the point you alluded to is kind of an offhanded point. I think is the primary point. It's all upstairs, because if you, I can't tell you how many times I was on the mound, and it was more than once and less than 30. But how many times I said, I really don't feel like I should throw this pitch, and I threw it, and I watched some fan dive for a souvenir as it went into the bleachers, and I was like, yeah, probably shouldn't do that again, and I did it again. But there's so much mental to this. In this day and age, that's what's happening. This pitch clock, all of these rule changes and things, they only affect pitchers that suck. Because the fact of the matter is, if the pitch clock impacts you, you're not a good pitcher. Because good pitchers don't work slow. They never have. Good pitchers work quick because in the dog days of August and September, their team's on and off the field faster than everybody else, and their teammates appreciate that. They work fast because umpires are calling balls and strikes. Umpires love guys that work fast. It's part of the game. And all the other stuff, all these rules, they're really, honestly, they don't impact pitchers that have talent.
Curt, I'm sitting here listening, and I can't, I'm thinking to myself, if I were Curt Schilling or any of the best pitchers of your era, and I had an opportunity already with a superhuman talent to just see what it's like to use spider tack in the bullpen, I would sure do it just to see what I'm capable of. I don't know how you didn't try it.
Well, I couldn't. Here's why. Because I was, in a sense, I had 3.5 pitches, but I was a 2-pitch pitcher. I was a fastball split guy. And my fingers, I could not afford to have my fingers be sticky, because when I threw my split, the ball needed to come out of my hands very naturally. And anything tacky, that's why I had trouble with rosin as well. I could never let it get on the inside of my hands, because I needed that ball. My split had to come out true to rotate like a fastball. And if I had stick on my finger, if I had any kind of stick on my fingers, it wouldn't. And so that was always, and so a guy like, in my generation, a guy like John Schmaltz, or somebody that had a phenomenal slider, I'm sure that matters to them. And it clearly was a big deal to Garrett. He got past it, which is good to see. But it was never something, same thing with a spitball. I know some guys, I'm still convinced that Greg Maddux won 4,000 games with Vaseline as his second best pitch, because the ball came out of his hand and did stuff that it's never done. And I played catch with him at the All-Star game just to find out. And it was like playing catch with Tim Wakefield. I mean, the movement he got off of. But the fact of the matter is, all of these things are just, they're secondary things, in a sense that if they become news items, they become news items because the player chooses for them to be exactly that.
What do you think about pitch comms? How would you have handled that with a catcher and the pitcher relationship?
Well, so you got to understand a couple things. First off, I threw probably close to 700 innings in the minor leagues before I got to the big leagues. I probably had anywhere between 10 and 20 complete games in the minor leagues, a couple close to 200 inning seasons in the minor leagues. Guys are finishing the season now with 192 innings. That was usually my innings count coming into September. And so, but it gets back to, and I know this kind of sounds like the angry old guy, get off my lawn speech, but the fact of the matter is the amount of money in the game now has made it so teams can't afford to leave their number one picks in the minor leagues to pitch. They need to get them to the big leagues to get that return on the investment. What they're failing to understand is that those kids are going to get hurt far faster and far earlier without those innings in the minor leagues. I learned how to pitch in the 8th inning with a runner on third and 2 outs in a 1-run game in A-ball in Savannah, Georgia. Not in Dodger Stadium, because when you learn, I don't ever want, as a pitching coach, I never want my pitchers to have to learn something for the first time in the big leagues. That's a recipe for injury and a recipe for failure.
Follow Curt on Twitter at Garrick38. Curt Schilling, our guest on OutKick 360.
You made mention of the pitch clock. I hate the fact that it could be necessary, but I can't stand these slow guys. You say they're slow because they're bad. How did it get so bad over time? And I understand it's first and foremost on the pitchers, but who should have reined it in if players weren't self-policing it?
Well, I don't know. Players used to rein it in because if you took too long to get in the box, Nolan Ryan threw one in your ribcage.
Yeah.
That's changed. That's the game.
But what about the other side? How do you rein it in when it's the pitcher taking too long?
Absolutely. But generally, you got to understand the minority of I would argue, and I have no statistical backup, but I'm going to tell you from experience, it's a very small minority of pitchers that are causing this clock. Because again, pitchers that work slow are not good. They may be good for a period of time, but they cannot be good consistently over time because it doesn't. I've never seen one. It just doesn't work that way. And there's a lot of reasons for it. Like I said, when you're playing in St. Louis in the middle of August and it's 140 degrees on the field, the last thing you want is a starting pitcher that's taking 2 minutes between pitches because your team's going to get and players in my era and I think before in the last couple of years, you would have guys say, "Dude, you got to pick it up. You got to pick it up. This is ridiculous. We're out there 15 minutes for a 3-up, 3-down. This is, and you did. That I don't know that conversation takes place anymore. And I got to tell you, part of the sentimental me is still in love with the fact that baseball was the only sport and is the only sport without a clock.
Same. And
that's gone from being a nuance to a negative because of television, number one. And probably primarily because that's where baseball is getting almost all of its revenue now. And I don't know that that's such a great thing, but it's also being tailored to the generation it's playing in front of, which is the immediate gratification TikTok, Snapchat viewer who wants their entertainment in 30-second spurts.
So I'm watching The Captain, the docuseries about Derek Jeter's career, and you popped up in the latest episode going through the 2001 World Series. And I'm sure you're going to pop up in the next part also because they are now transitioning to the 2004 season where you were a part of the Red Sox. The big part of the series is this divide and feud between A-Rod and Derek Jeter and different ideologies between the two. A-Rod is presented as the guy who only cared about stats, and he had great stats, and Jeter presented as the guy, and he's presenting himself as this, that only cared about wins and would do whatever it took to win the game, and that's all that mattered. What was it like facing those guys? And when I say those things of how it's presented, what are your first thoughts about both players?
Well, I mean, as a player, when I played, I don't remember anybody ever played with liking Alex. And that's just because I think a lot of it had to do with what I would argue that one of the truest places for character is the clubhouse, the locker room. You can't bullshit people in the locker room. We're together 9 months. We're together usually 12 to 16 hours a day. You can be fake for about a week into spring training, and then it all goes away, and everybody figures it out. And I think there was a lot of people looked at Alex as just a complete fake and what he presented himself as. And I was as hard as anybody, I think, on Alex when he played. And I actually had a moment after I retired when I was with the other sports network that will remain nameless. But we were covering them, and I actually had a chance. I went in one morning early in spring training and made a point to introduce myself, say hello to him, and apologize for the things that I had said about him over his career. And it came after an article came out after. Remember when he got caught and there was a big article about him talking to his kids and explaining to his daughters. And it was at a period of time in my life when I was going through some really rough stuff off the field. And I had that conversation. And as a father, I kind of identified with it. And but I had a chance to cover smooth over it. They were both, Alex was so good that he was easy to pitch to. And by that, I mean, Alex was a guy, and I have this in my notebook, and I still have it. I literally wrote it down. No repeat pitch, no repeat location, no repeat pattern, which means, very simply, I had to have 3 pitches that I could locate in multiple places every single at bat against him. And if I couldn't, then that was going to be a problem. Derek was different. Early in my career, to the point where I think I lost my velocity, I had his number. Because he hit the Yankee Stadium, and he played the ball to right center, right field, and he did that even when he wasn't in Yankee Stadium. So for me, Derek was all about hard in, and not really mixing it up a lot, but just hard in. And I threw the ball 96 to 98. And then, in my mind, I could dot a gnat's ass at 60 feet. So if I'm going to miss in, I'm going to knock him on his butt or something to that effect. So I stayed in. When I lost my velocity, he started to wear me out a little bit because I didn't have the stuff to mix it up on him and get him out. But both of them were, I would tell you, there were guys in my career, a list of 10 or 15, who every at bat, no matter what the date of the game was, from spring training to World Series, got everything I had with every pitch. And those were 2 of the guys.
Curt Schilling has been our guest on OutKick 360. Curt, we wanted to have you on to discuss the best bullpen moves and all this stuff at the trade deadline. I hope you enjoyed the storytelling there, because we did.
I don't mind. Baseball's baseball.
Oh, yeah, man. And we would love to pick back up at some point down the road with you as well, if possible.
Anytime.
Is there one move that comes to mind for you at the trade deadline that is a game changer?
I got to tell you, I'm not a big gambler. But I made a very big wager before today. After the Yankees after the Padres got Hader from Milwaukee, I put all my money in on there's no doubt in my mind they were going to be the team that got Soto, because that Hader move isn't made by a team that is trying to feel its way into the postseason. That's a team that's saying, hey, listen, we're going all in. And I guess I disagree with the fact that they needed Soto to keep up with the Dodgers. Because I don't think you keep up with a team offensively. I think you neutralize that with pitching. And I thought the Hader move was that kind of a move. Everybody that I've heard and talked to and everything that I've seen, the prospect haul was pretty ginormous for the Nationals, with the potential to have 3 potential all-stars, maybe 4 or 5 big league players. And I got to tell you, I'm not sure of any player I've ever known that was worth 5 big leaguers. And so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. The difference is, this is a very different deal. They have him for a couple years in San Diego. I mean, the thing to watch for me is that his defensive metrics have plummeted in Washington over the last year, and he's going to San Diego, which might be one of the largest outfields in all baseball.
Good point.
Curt Schilling has been our guest. Curt, thank you for the time, man, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Terrific. Thanks, Curt.
All right.
That's a terrific point.
Yes.
Let's watch Soto's defense. The Yankees had concerns about that.
I wish
Stanton's already
something
not a
that
good
I
outfielder.
haven't heard from anyone else to be on the lookout for with Soto. It's all about offense.
Wrong
with
park.
him.
Wrong park.
I wish we had Curt on yesterday, so we would have known to make that move at FanDuel.
Yeah. We could have made some
I'm still
money.
locked out of my account.
So it wouldn't have mattered. You could have given me some cash.
I have to send them a
place
picture of me holding up the date
Yeah.
and a copy of my driver's license. It sounds like a hostage situation.
Today's newspaper, please, sir.
Yeah, it's legit.
What I'm hearing is Davey needs to pick it up and give us a heads up when Kurt's got the bet to make on FanDuel or wherever. So we need to get a heads up on that next time.
From the mound to the plate, Jim Leyritz
My
joins
guy.
us next on OutKick 360.
Wrong uniform.
OutKick 360 rolls on across the OutKick network. Jim Leyritz will join us momentarily. Some NFL news on the field today at training camp. Tim Patrick, wide receiver for the Broncos, tore his ACL at practice today. He, of course, will miss the entire 2022 NFL season. That's not the only ACL injury today for the Broncos, right?
Yeah, second player who I'm not familiar with, not high ranking, also told people he's out with the ACL.
With the same injury.
Yeah, so a bad day for the Broncos.
So Patrick was going to factor in as one of the big three receivers that was sticking around for Russell Wilson. So now they've got Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy. They have KJ Hamler who can step in. A few others. They've got a couple of undrafted free agent wide receivers that are working in the mix there as well. But not good news. And really, him and James Washington, wide receiver down in Dallas now.
Fractured foot.
The two big injuries of this week thus far. There was an injury
Washington
scare.
and Gallup are both missing the beginning of the season for the Cowboys.
Yeah. There was an injury scare a bit yesterday with Mahomes, where he clearly tweaked an ankle and went into the tent. The shocking thing for me on that was that he came back out with an ankle wrapped and finished practice.
Yeah,
and then came back out today. Like that stuff you just don't see, right? That's a game day
If a guy
thing.
goes in, a quarterback goes in, you usually take the rest of the day.
Jim Leyritz about to join us. So the backstory here with Jim, I met him at an event with Titan safety Kevin Byard and free agent at the time wide receiver Golden Tate a couple of months ago. Golden was briefly with the Titans on the practice squad at the tail end of last season.
5-6 weeks.
Yeah, and then he stuck around. He's from the area here and joined Byard for a great event in Murfreesboro that helps out by sending kids to football camp. And Jim Leyritz was in the audience and met him after the event. He came up and we just briefly chatted, and he was like, I said, I'd love to, get you on the show. We'll talk some ball at some point if you're into that. And he's like, yeah, here's my number. And it was that simple. And, a few months later, I shoot Jim a text, and he immediately gets back to me. Here's two-time World Series champion Jim Leyritz on OutKick 360. Jim, hope you're well.
I'm doing good. How you guys doing tonight?
We are great.
Fantastic.
I am particularly great because Chad down there is a Braves guy. I am a Yankees guy since '76, and the captain just served as a huge reminder, ran us through '96, and I don't think either of us realized just how bad it was for the Yanks, having lost 12-1 and 4-0 before gotten to 2-1 in games. Then down 6-0 in the sixth. It looked like they were talking like the series was over. Chipped away to get to 6-3 before you came up and belted the 3-run homer that just turned his team into the losers that they were.
You broke my 14-year-old heart. I was watching that game from a hotel in Knoxville, staying there with my grandfather, who was taking me to a Tennessee-Alabama game. I want to say it was either the next day or it was the night after the game on a Saturday night. It was a Friday or Saturday night game. Watch that home run happen while I believe my grandfather was down at the hotel bar having drinks.
Take us through your glory moment,
I was by
Jim.
myself as the only baseball fan on the trip and watched you just rip the heart out of the
Take
Braves.
us through your glory moment, our glory moment, yours and mine.
So every time I hear that story from a Braves fan, I always say this: I'm sorry to make the story worse than just the home run and just that game, because there was two scouts that were sitting up in John Schuerholz's booth that night that had a chance to draft me out of high school in Cincinnati, Ohio. And they asked my dad how much it would take to sign me. And my dad said, give him 10 grand. And they said, we could only give him 5. And those two scouts were in that booth in John Schuerholz and looked at each other and said, do not tell Schuerholz for $5,000 we could have changed this entire scenario.
It was terrific.
Unbelievable.
How much do you know?
Did you flip them off on your way around the bases? Do you find a booth and hey, let's point out these guys?
How do you feel about what the Yankees have done before the deadline with Benintendi and now Montes, Trevino, and Efros to solidify the staff?
Well, listen, I'll tell you one thing. I mean, Brian Cashman is looking like a genius because we didn't give up our top prospects, and we reloaded pretty well. They got rid of Gallo. Surprising that they even got something in return, but they did. And I think there were some great moves that were made. I mean, right now you're watching everybody else. I mean, the Padres have gone full tilt with what they're doing, but I think the Yankees are stronger today than they were yesterday, and that makes. And I'm not saying for the season because they've always won 90, 100 games. The postseason has been their Achilles heel. And I think finally, they have a team that is ready for a postseason run like they haven't had in the past.
Jim Leyritz, our guest on OutKick 360. Are you watching The Captain, the documentary series on Jeter as much as the rest of the country seems to be watching?
Yeah, so they did a screening at the Yankee Stadium. They showed the first 2 episodes. They invited Derek there. I was there that night, and I watched the first 2 episodes with Derek. And I looked at him after the second episode, and I said, "Hey, dude, I really got to thank you because you made me relevant again."
I'm watching and loving it, just like I love The Last Dance of the Bulls, just revisiting that era of the game and, going through. I joke, but, I watched the Home Run Derby, and then right after I watched the mid-'90s Mariners team, and I'm thinking, I know every single player on this Mariners team that the Yankees are playing, and I didn't know the kid from the Mariners who just almost won the Home Run Derby at the time. I got to really freshen up on today's game. But that era of the game and how quickly Derek Jeter ingratiated himself with that locker room and with that city is what really amazed me. And I watch it, Jim, and I see a guy that while he's very likable and is a guy you believe in, he's a guy you don't want to cross. And I think that comes across well while he's talking about playing the game. Did you sense that with him also?
Well, that night that I was at the stadium, I sat with the producer, Randy Wilkins. And, I was talking to Randy. I'm like, listen, you didn't even interview me. And my home runs were the most important thing in the beginning of Derek's career. And he said, he goes, we couldn't get everybody that we wanted to. But he said, the really crazy thing, Jimmy, that you're going to see in this documentary is a side of Derek you've probably never seen, because during his career, he kept everything PC. He didn't say anything to create controversy. He didn't say anything that would upend. And during these 7-part series, he gets pretty raw with his feelings and how he felt as it goes on. His later years with the Yankees, some of the problems he had with Cashman, some of the problems, the reason why he has never really been back to Yankee Stadium. He gets pretty raw about those things. And that was a pretty cool side to see about Derek that you don't normally see.
Jim, in your time there, are you cognizant of the fact that you're living in a moment that's going to be recognized years down the road with him and the way that team was built and the way it came together?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people forget about all of the obstacles. When they look at Derek Jeter, they think this guy's had a storied career, Hollywood ending, all these great things, the best looking women in the world. This guy's had, the silver spoon in his mouth, but they don't realize really all of the hardships and the things that it took to keep where he was, to stay where he was, to stay out of trouble where he was, and just how much of a great job that he did being a guy playing in New York for 20 years at the level that he played at, with the scrutiny that he went through to stay clean through most of it. It was pretty special.
So you're in New York, mid-'90s. You're out in 97. You're back 99, 2000. What was the shift like in that clubhouse in terms of leadership? Who set the tone for that first World Championship in 96 in that locker room? And how much different was it with Derek and his leadership and everyone else when you came back in 99?
Yeah, I mean, like we mentioned, Derek, when he started in 96, only because Tony Fernandez broke his hand, had that not happened, Derek Jeter wouldn't be in the big leagues. And I always tell people, whenever there's a Derek Jeter celebration, when Tony was still alive, God rest his soul, that I thought Tony should be invited because he's the reason Derek started in 96. But the one thing that you could tell about Derek from the beginning is he had this, I always say, the Don Mattingly type of attitude. He wasn't a big rah-rah guy. He wasn't a big cheerleader, but he led by example. He led by the hard work that he put in every day, and you respected that. And then, of course, for him to do what he did in 96, to do what he did in 98, and by 99, when I came back, I was kind of curious to see if this kid who had all the success would let it go to his head. And when I showed up in Texas, in the heat of Texas in 99, he still was taking 200 ground balls. He was still taking 250 swings in the cage. He never let his pre-workout get in the way. And that's why he played at the level he did for so long.
What was O'Neill's role in the leadership pecking order there?
Same thing. He was a guy that expected perfection from himself. He was never satisfied, just like Derek. You know what? He could go 3 for 4. And if we didn't win, he'd be ticked off. And again, his temperament gave a little bit of a personality to our ball club that, you know, that was needed because a lot of guys were PC guys, but you had guys like myself, Darryl Strawberry, you know, guys like Paul that had a little bit of a personality that kept the team a little more loose and a little more fiery.
I was a huge Darryl Strawberry fan growing up. I didn't realize he was so much of a likes to fight guy until I watched this docuseries. He was in the middle of everything. Anytime someone crossed you guys, Darryl Strawberry was the first guy to go across the diamond and pop somebody.
Well, yeah, people always say to me, why did Don Zimmer run out in 2004 and do that? I said, because Darryl Strawberry and Jim Leyritz weren't there to help.
That loss to the Mariners the year before the first championship is well represented in the Jeter series, and Mattingly's last game there in Seattle. They talk about him coming on the plane and thanking some guys, knowing that he was going to retire there. How sentimental was that, and how much did you guys kind of know that as bad as that was, the ending to that season, that you were on the brink of something there?
Yeah, you know, we all knew from the beginning of the year that this was Donnie's last year. He was not going to play another season. His back was too screwed up. I mean, most people didn't see, again, the 5 or 6 hours of pre-work, you know, swimming in the hotel pool at 9 o'clock in the morning, trying to get himself loose so he could actually get to the ballpark and take batting practice and try to get ready to play. People didn't see all that, but we did. And we knew it was his last year. And for someone like him, who was such a great Yankee, and people always ask me, who was your favorite teammate ever? I always say first, I played with Donnie for 5 years. There has not been a better person that I ever played with in the game than Don Mattingly. And Buck Showalter really made it a point that year that said, we need to get him to the playoffs. And when we got the wild card, when Pat Kelly hit the home run in Toronto to seal the wild card, we knew we were taking Donnie, to the playoffs for the first time. It was a huge, huge boost for us. And of course, you know, we win the first 2 games. We thought we were going to come back for more. And the only thing that we regret is we didn't give Donnie the proper send-off, not knowing we weren't going to come back.
Jim Leyritz, our guest on OutKick 360. Jim, I recently wrote a column at OutKick about what I would consider the good old days. Everyone looks to their childhood as the good old days, where growing up, we're all baseball fans. We knew the players' names. We knew the lineups. We knew the nicknames and the batting stances. If we're playing wiffle ball, we could mimic the batting stances. You certainly were well known in the late 90s with the batting stance, which we just don't see that unique aspect and personality today across the game. We see it some, but not nearly to the extent as it used to be. Who taught you the batting stance, or did it just, for some reason, was it just natural and comfortable for you?
No, it actually goes back to my senior year in high school. I was supposed to be drafted by your Braves over there. And I broke my foot, but I just fractured it. I was only going to be out 2 or 3 weeks. And the Brave Scout told me he was going to come watch me play at the end of the summer. And I said, okay. And so I told my dad, listen, put an air cast on my foot. I want to take batting practice every day. So when I'm able to play, I am ready. I'm not out of shape. And so they put a cast on my left leg, and I couldn't put pressure on it. And I took batting practice every day for 3 weeks with that leg stiff. And it just became something that, felt natural after they finally took it off. And of course, turned out to be my stance for my entire career.
Wow.
It's amazing.
What was the transition like from Buck Showalter in 95 to Joe Torre in 96? It obviously worked out well for the Yankees, but how different were those personalities?
Well, yeah, it was completely different. I mean, Buck Showalter was probably the smartest, most intelligent manager I have ever played for in any line of college, high school, even professional. The smartest manager I ever played for. But early in his career, and Buck will tell you, he didn't have much of a personality, and he didn't get along with all the players. He wasn't personable enough to get along with everybody. And that was where he had some trouble. Joe Torre came in 96. He had the squad to win. All he had to do was manage personalities. And that was his forte. He was one of the best managers of people that I have ever seen in my entire life. He was able to turn your ego off. He was able to, guys like myself who were complaining about playing, he was able to make us feel like, no, even if you're not playing, you're still going to be important to this team. He was so good at that. And then, of course, he hired Don Zimmer to sit next to him that knew everything about the game. That combination of those two, there was nobody better in the game than Don Zimmer and Joe Torre.
Since you've already rained on my parade, I'm going to get personal again here with this. Did you cross paths at all with David Justice in the city of Cincinnati when you were growing up? He's my all-time favorite player as a kid. I know you both grew up in Cincinnati high school baseball.
Well, and basketball, because basketball was my number one sport also, just like David. But we never, I think I want to say he was 3 or 4 years behind me. So we never crossed paths, but everybody talked about you and David Justice as the big two sports athletes coming out of Cincinnati, Ohio.
Hey, so I'm noticing on your Twitter account, Jim, it says 3-time World Series champ in the bio.
Yes.
We've said 2. Others across other visits introduce you as a 2-time World Series champ. Why do we get it wrong so often?
So here's the funny thing. So when they did the Core 4 and they included Jorge Posada, they called him a 5-time World Series champion. And he was not on the 96 championship team. So even though he got a ring and a check because he played somewhat during the 96 season, they considered that a 5-time World Series champion. So when I heard that at age 55, I said to myself, wait a minute, I was on the 2000 team all the way till August. They gave me a ring. They gave me a check. I'm a 3-time World Series champion too.
If they gave it to you, man, you've got 3 rings.
You got the ring.
It's true.
You have the ring.
It's true.
I mean, you're a champion. Congratulations, by the way, on that 3rd championship.
We stand corrected.
Yes,
Jim, I hope you'll definitely pop back on the show from time to time. This has been an awesome chat down memory lane, but we certainly want to chat some postseason baseball with you too as they make the turn.
While the Yankees are ripping through the playoffs.
I would love to get your review of each episode of The Captain also, and you tell us what you liked the most about it. If you didn't like something, if something was factually a little bit off, please join us and tell us.
I am more than willing. I'm having surgery on my bicep on Thursday. I'll have plenty of downtime to do a lot of talking during the playoffs and World Series. But here's what I really want to do.
Yeah.
I want you on a campaign when you get a team in Nashville to bring me into the front office and let me be a part of bringing baseball to Nashville, because that's where I want to end my career and raise my grandkids for the Nashville baseball team.
Jim, as long as you don't hire a scout that butchers things the way that Brave scout did years ago and did not go up to $10,000, if you promise to do that and hire better scouts,
we'll back you.
We'll petition for you.
We can definitely do that.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jim. We appreciate you.
All right, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. Jim Leyritz there on Twitter at the real Jim Leyritz. I'd love to meet the fake Jim Leyritz, who won't give him the Twitter account.
Who take you back to a time and a place, man. That's one.
Really, really cool dude. And again, very gracious with us there, and just a random encounter at a charity event where he was helping out Bayard and others in Murfreesboro. Hit us up on Twitter today. It's been a very fast-paced show with a lot of news on the
Last
NFL,
two shows have been that
Major
way.
League Baseball, and others, other headlines. Hit us up with your take there at OutKick 360. If you missed portions of the show, you can always find it wherever you download your podcast. We will recap the big headlines that you need to know about today when we return on OutKick 360. Appreciate all the great stations across the network that you may be currently listening to right now. We appreciate that. Hit us up on Twitter at OutKick360. You can follow us on Facebook. The live stream available there as well as YouTube. Subscribe to the page searching OutKick360. So the Miami Dolphins were docked a first-round pick next year plus a third-round pick in 2024. That also goes with a $1.5 million fine for Stephen Ross, the owner, not for tanking games or the alleged $100,000 proposal to Brian Flores to lose on purpose. It was for tampering with Tom Brady and Sean Payton. 2019, Brady met with them, and same goes for December of last year. The league says that Brady met with them about potentially playing, and then last year it was more about ownership or having an executive's role in the front office, and also Sean Payton potentially, they would have to trade for him, of course, but trade for him, and then he would be the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. That was the penalty that came down. And I should also mention that Stephen Ross isn't around the team for a couple of months. It's the middle of October when he can return. That is on the lenient side of things in terms of the penalty itself.
Can we get to the real big news of the day?
Yes, please.
That just broke. Dane Cook, this according to Page 6, 50 years old, has now engaged to his longtime love, Kelsey Taylor, who is 23.
Long time
love, Kelsey Taylor, 23. Click on the story at Page 6, and it's 5 years, which raises some interesting questions about Dane Cook
honestly,
and Kelsey Taylor.
18th birthday.
5 years into a relationship is when the guy is really starting to hear about the put up or shut up time.
Yeah.
With the engagement. So, I
Just
mean, I guess that is a long
it started at 45 and 18.
dating relationship.
Yes. No, it is a long time.
Yeah.
But we're saying the beginning of the long time was right when he was allowed to begin.
I have not heard from Dane Cook in a long time. Dane Cook was on fire from 2001 to 2006. He starred in a few movies in the mid-aughts and then disappeared.
Then he was no longer on fire.
He was he had a window of time, and that time ended.
Disappeared.
And that time is not now. Well, actually, it is now.
Now he's back in the news.
Now he's back. Yes, marrying his 23-year-old longtime love.
Juan Soto to the Padres. That's the mega news as the MLB trade deadline is about to hit. A reporter out of Washington says the Nationals had Bryce Harper, Anthony Rendon, Max Scherzer, Trey Turner, and Juan Soto, and all gone in a matter of a few years. And
got a World Series out of it.
Of course, the Astros had George Springer, Carlos Carrera, Charlie Morton, and Garrett Cole. They're all gone, and the team is currently 67-37.
And
that's amazing.
Putting
Only
fear into the
games
hearts
off.
and minds of Paul Koharski and
Only
other
2
Yankees
games
fans.
off, home field.
Another busy show in the books. Hope you enjoyed it. We are back at it tomorrow. Jay Cutler joins us, as well as many more headlines on OutKick 360.
I beg of you, do not block the box, but kindly lock your locks.